This is Dr. Emily Sterning with AR, and I'd like to say hello to all of our friends in Utah. I have to say, Utah is a very interesting state as we look towards 2050. There are so many great communities in Utah with a high degree of preparedness. And these are strong, interconnected, caring communities, the kind of place that can really make it during tough times. Let's look at what changes you can expect in your home state, what sort of challenges you should be preparing for, and what opportunities might be used to your advantage. First things first, let's look at our historic changes in temperature. So this is in the National Climate Assessment, and we can see that from 1901 to 2016, all across the Southwest, we have seen big increases in temperature. This is true in Utah, where we have seen an increase of a degree and a half up in our most populated areas. And down here on the Colorado Plateau, historically, we've seen what is going to be a trend we're going to look at over the course of this forecast, where we've seen dramatic warming here by Moab and Canyonlands. So this lets us know where we've come from for over the last 120 years. Now we're going to look at where we're going. We're going to go over to the USDA Heat Map and look at changes as we approach mid-century. So this map allows us to look at what the typical summer looks like. The colors here represent the number of days over 86 degrees, sort of the turning point where a lot of people want to turn the air on, right? We can see that in Utah, a lot of the most populated parts of the state have historically had a very cool summer, a summer with less than 30 days of heat, notable heat a year. And that we have seen a little bit more heat over as we get closer to Nevada, and pretty substantially warm summers up to 120 days of heat on the Colorado Plateau. So let's look at what we expect to happen as we move towards mid-century under a scenario with moderately reduced emissions, which I think is our most likely climate future. So we do see some dramatic changes in the heat, right? We see some pretty serious warm-ups, but we see that it's relatively conserved in our more populated areas. And we'll zoom in there in a second. First, let's note that we see the most extreme warming occur here. Projected warming is likely to be pretty severe on the Colorado Plateau. You had been looking at 120 days max of warm summer. Now it's looking worse. It's looking more like 150. Let's go back to contemporary temperatures and look in here at Salt Lake City. Let's see what's going to go on with our populated areas. So a lot of folks have lived high enough up the mountain where they have seen maybe 45 warm days a year, maybe 30. And we can see that this is going to increase pretty dramatically as the cool moves up the mountain, where a lot of people now are going to be in this sort of yellow to sort of greenish shaded band, where we're looking at 60 to maybe 90 days of heat. This is typical for American cities, for American population centers around the country. We expect a longer, hotter summer. So this is a little alarming when you look at it in isolation. If you were to look at this information for, say, Los Angeles, you would see that Salt Lake City and the surrounding communities are actually having a pretty mild level of change. Compared to other Southwestern communities, this is a moderate level of summer heat increase for a populated area. Still not great, but it's good for us to look at it straight on, look at it in the face, so that we can prepare in terms of energy generation. More people are going to want to be able to cool their homes with those hotter summers, right? Thinking back out at what the state as a whole looked like, that worst impacted area in the southeast corner there, that is an area of transformational concern. That's going to become a more extreme desert environment than we've seen in the state before, right there on the Colorado Plateau. We can see that the desert is changing. There's been a lot of plant death there in the last 10 years. The heat has even killed the biocrust. That's the microbial layer on top of the desert soil. It's so fragile and so hard to establish. So we're looking at changes in that part of the state that are extreme and concerning. And it is a topic that really requires a shout out to the people of Utah who have been serious pioneers in desert soil restoration. For those of us who aren't familiar with these fragile desert ecosystems, the surface of the desert soil is alive. It's made up of a delicate interconnected layer of microorganisms. And that's why you shouldn't walk off trail in a desert park. Your steps are going to kill that biocrust. It can take hundreds of years to regrow after, say, someone runs one of those quads through a pristine desert environment. So if you know the desert, when you hear the heat is killing the biocrust, you're going to feel your gut clench up a little, you know? After those biocrust deaths, Utah has been working to do soil restoration by transplanting healthy biocrust, healthy microbial communities, and it's such important work. Not only does it reduce air pollution, you're going to get way less dust, way less blowing particulates when you got a healthy biocrust, but it's crucial for improving soil fertility. There are so many very interesting plants and creatures that live in these extreme desert environments, many plants with extraordinary medical research potential. The desert soil work Utah is doing, it's so informed and it's so beautifully in opposition to the often cruel and primitive way we Americans have treated the desert soil. It really touched my heart to hear about that good work from the people of Utah. It was extreme heat that killed the biocrust, not typical summer heat. It was a major heat wave. So let's look at extreme heat projections for the region, and that'll take me just a second to pull up. We're going to move back over to the National Climate Assessment, which has a look at projected changes in extreme heat over the Southwest. Now, this is a map looking towards mid-century, and you're looking at the number of days over 90. So this is sort of a nice proxy for how many really crazy heat waves you can expect. And this is, again, good news for the most populated parts of Utah. We can see we expect very little change up in the Wasatch Mountains there, and that on the Colorado Plateau, and as we get closer to Nevada on the border over there, the changes in the desert are looking pretty serious. Pretty big heat up in terms of your normal summer when we looked at the USDA heat map, and pretty big changes when you're looking at changes in extreme heat. We can see that on the plateau, we could be looking at 50 days. In a typical year over 90, there's going to be more potential for heat waves there, and especially here in this region bordering Nevada. So it's information that is concerning. Something is happening there. In that desert in the southeast corner, something new is happening. I'm very glad the people of Utah care about the desert, because that's a place where something is changing, both dying and being born. There's a lot of work that will need to be done with the involvement of the tribal nations in that area. And that is a part of the state with a lot of indigenous people. Many people connect with the Navajo and the Ute. We need to work together to try and find out what's going on there. If we have any passed down knowledge that may be relevant, and how we can maybe support or maybe contain that desert transition that looks fairly alarming. With the trends we're seeing, with my limited knowledge and experience, I would worry though about conversion to the type of desert where you have a lot of exposed, dry and sandy substrate. That can blow around, and that tends to spread the desert. It can be very hard to turn the clock back on that. Hard to fight that type of desertification. It's crucial to conserve soil around the changing zone as much as possible. We're looking at big challenges in that, and very serious challenges. Now, let's look at a little bit of brighter news. We saw that limited increased heat in populated areas, but it was there. It might be better than the outlook for LA, but it is heating up around Salt Lake City. So of course we want to check on our energy outlook. We'll go back to the National Climate Assessment for that, which has looked at energy changes in the Southwest. And here we really have a pretty nice story for Utah, right? As we look at these circles, we're looking at projected change in power generation by mid-century. You can see a lot more of these dark orange and red circles in pretty much every state, except for Utah has a pretty decent concentration where we see increased energy projection. That's nice to see, and it lines up with our populated areas. Best energy outlook in the Southwest right now for your state. I'm happy to show that. You're going to expect continued increases in population, you can imagine, with this relatively mild forecast for populated areas so far. So as Utah undergoes your energy transition, you're going to want to keep up your good work. It's a nice outlook for your energy, some good local news, and I know you'll keep up the good work. Now let's talk about the winter. The winter is so important for this state, isn't it? That snowpack, it's crucial. 90% of your municipal water in populated areas comes from the snowpack, and so many wonderful landscapes and outdoor experiences come downstream from the snowpack. We all know this is our big area of concern, the water. So let's look at the projections. First thing we're going to do is look at projected winter loads through the lens of plant hardiness zones. That's going to let us see how the winter might change, how our ability to hold snowpack on the mountains might change. So let's check this out. This is historical data from 1980 to 2009, and it shows the current plant hardiness zones of Utah, where we can go as low as a 4, we go down to a 7. Let's look at mid-century under RCP 4.5. And we do see changes, right? But this is not as extreme or dramatic as the changes that we saw in terms of heat. Relatively less change to the winter than the summer we would anticipate here in Utah. Let's go back to contemporary and zoom in on some of our more populated areas and see how that's going to change. All right, looking towards mid-century, we can see relatively little climb up the mountain there of those plant hardiness zones, right? Mostly an expansion to zone 7. So this is really nice news for your established and mature plants, for your big trees. If they're not going to be experiencing a change in plant hardiness zone, they will have more heat stress and water stress in the summer, but they're going to have a period of stability. It means it's much more likely that a lot of the landscaping work that has been done in this area will be maintained as we move towards mid-century. All right, so we're looking there at our projected changes. We're going to zoom back out. You'll notice that Utah has less fragmentation of those cool zones than other states in the Southwest. Better hold of the winter in these mountains than in other places in the Southwestern region. More connectivity of those cool mountain habitats. It's pretty nice, relatively speaking. Everyone is going to have challenges, but this relative conservation in Utah, I think, is very positive. These projections, they don't make me as concerned about these mountains' potential ability to hold snowpack as some other places. I'm pretty dramatically concerned for California's, Sierra Nevada's ability to hold snowpack. Those mountains in Arizona that hold snowpack today are unlikely to hold snowpack as we move towards mid-century. Utah's mountains will have a better ability to hold snowpack. However, we are still looking at a probable very serious snowpack decrease by 2050, and that's because of the drought. That big concern, the Southwestern Drought, that great drought has come back to our region. It comes and kicks people out of the region in fairly regular cycles over the period of hundreds of years. The drought is impacting Utah today. It's impacted cattle operations, for example, both in terms of concerns about forage, about finding enough for the cows to eat, and concerns about water supply for them to drink. 20 years ago, the government did a survey and only 14% of operations felt ready for the drought. Today, we are all pretty much in agreement. Almost no one is ready for this drought of the magnitude we're experiencing now. But when we read the headlines in the news, it's good to remember that those headlines are almost all about California. Let's look at what the snowpack is doing in Utah today. So here we can look at the USDA's Utah Snow Survey Program, and you can look at how the snowpack is doing however you want, and they update it very regularly. This was last updated yesterday, I think. Yep, March 9th, end of day, and they'll get it again today. You can see that the snowpack is not doing awesome. You know, we're in this yellow zone for snowpack this year in Utah, but in other parts of the Southwest, we're in the red. So we got to count our relative blessings here. And that there are some areas where we see pretty good snowpack. We see it where we would want it to be. We will see continued decrease in the snowpack as we move towards 2050. And anyone is going to think about alternative sources of water, right? Where else can we get water? How are the aquifers of Utah doing? I took a deep dive into this. There's so much information, careful analysis, careful decision-making, going back 40 years related to the US Geological Surveys, and very careful watershed management in Utah, going back well over 100 years. So thanks to the US Geological Survey, we have a very high degree of knowledge about how much water is in Utah's aquifers, how much of it is fresh versus saline. And big picture, there's a lot of very good quality water in the aquifers in Utah, very pure, very fresh water. Although there are farmers who are using the groundwater now, there's been a lot of care taken to see how the aquifer recharge has gone. We've been depleting the aquifers very slowly, those that have been tapped into. There are some that are still completely untapped. The state of Utah has made big efforts to use snowpack and surface water rather than touch the aquifers. They've preserved that aquifer water so carefully and so deliberately, and they've preserved it at every level. Water consumption has not increased in Utah at the same rate as the population. So there are powerful local water conservancy efforts and efficiency standards that have been effective. We have seen that Utah is, of course, involved in the Southwestern Drought. Utah's not at the heart of it, but they're involved. But Utah is dealing with water systems which are less connected to the most severely impacted states, to Nevada, California, and Arizona, than any other state in the region. That disconnect, that degree of water independence, it's very protective. No one is going to be able to take this carefully stewarded water in the aquifers from Utah. Utah has kept the groundwater safe, and the groundwater is going to keep Utah safe. Utah is going to have to make tough water choices. Depending on what happens with the snowpack, thinking about doing agriculture for this population with just the aquifer water, that's rough decisions. But Utah has a history of stewardship, of great care, quality care of water resources. Watching this forecast, you should be proud of the century of work, care, and stewardship that has resulted in just fabulous aquifer conditions at this crucial time, as we fear we may be approaching our hour of need for water in the West. I know that the people of Utah have been in tough spots before, where they've dug in and made a good future out of very challenging conditions. The people of Utah have the resilience needed for the changes that are coming. And I believe that many people in Utah are highly aware of these changes and are getting ready. I hope this video showed you some of the clear boundaries where you can expect changes to come that will impact your community and that'll help you refine your plans. Considering all the factors we've talked about today, the relative mildness of impacts to populated areas, the level of community organization and resilience, the culture of home and community preparedness, your current and historic track record of water stewardship, Utah, I'm rooting for you. I give your state, in my opinion, best overall outlook in the Southwestern region. Before I sign out, I wanted to share a great preparedness resource that's been on my mind as I did research for this video. And that is the home storage centers provided by the LDS Church. Here's their website. You're going to find this in the video description too, if you want to check it out. So this is where I get my food storage. You can get long-term storage here. You can order it online. If they have a home storage center anywhere near you, it's a lot easier to just drive there and get the food. You can pick it out. It's a normal store-like environment, and it's way cheaper if you get it in person. Imagine you're a kid in a situation where your family has had to go over to the stored food. If someone serves you rehydrated chicken enchiladas for breakfast, you know you're in an emergency. You know in your body that things have gone seriously weird, right? But imagine instead that your folks put out some normal bowls of oatmeal, maybe they put some honey on there. A kid in that situation, they're going to know in their body that today is just a day. Maybe the work is going to be hard today, but that kid isn't going to experience the same gut level sense of emergency. If you have thought about laying in some food for long-term storage, 30-year storage, this isn't the sort of resource that gets highlighted on most channels. I learned about the LDS food storage through interfaith networks, not like survivalist networks, you know? And I think there's a lot of merit in taking a calm, kind, community-based approach to preparedness, focusing on the quality of the home, the quality of your life, as you think about preparing for our best possible future. Like I say, I'm not affiliated with the church. No one from the church has been anything but decent to me regardless. This is my family's go-to for affordable, healthy, real long-term food storage. I just wanted to share. And I do want to thank the church. They do a real kindness with this resource. It's a real act of chesed. This is Dr. Scherning with AR signing out. Please like and subscribe. Help get the message out there. There is hope. We can prepare for what's coming. Let's get ready.